My guest today is Adam Walker. He's a registered psychologist, writer, speaker, musician, and he's also the creator of the Breadcrumbs and Alarm Clocks framework, which is an integrative model explaining the relationship between the nervous system, story, symbolism, healing, and human transformation. His work bridges psychology, trauma therapy, subculture, meditation, mythology, and embodied practices to help people better understand the turning points that shape their lives. Adam's background spans psychology, music, skateboarding, culture, martial arts, visionary art, and contemplative practice. And he's currently developing a broader body of work exploring symbolic literacy, awakening, and cultural healing. Welcome, Adam.
Thank you so much for having me.
That's wonderful. So you wear a few hats, it sounds like.
Yeah. Although I'm doing my best to actually try and just make them all into one hat.
Uh,
Because thinking about them all as separate individual hats gets way too complex.
Yeah, I'm hearing identity, right? Like you must have done some exploration around identity to have all these different pieces, but then to be bringing them under one.
Absolutely, yeah. Like all humans being, like trying to figure out what we really are has definitely been a central part of my journey. And so I have traversed many different landscapes trying to fit in. And yeah, from time to time, that's been existentially difficult for sure. I definitely think age has a little bit to do with being able to bring it back into the center, going through some pretty important age milestones and having children and watching them develop and learning a little bit more about how nervous systems work from an observable kind of perspective. It's all been part of helping me culminate and then consolidate the identity that is much more manageable for me now, which is I'm just Adam.
Yeah, the ultimate goal, right? Like just
You
being the
got you can
self.
you can read all the you can read all the labels and stuff like that, and if your guests like it, that's cool.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
but it's really interesting, hearing my own bio. Like when I do these podcasts and having the host read the bio, and it's really quite a profound experience to hear all of that and go, oh I do all that stuff, and I have kind of done all that stuff.
Mm.
And if I let it get to me, yeah, it actually can become overwhelmingly complex. But yeah, I'd really like to just declare that, yeah, I just really try and bring it down to one thing that I do, which is just to be Adam and to pay attention as much as I can. And then all of those things that I've done have just essentially sprung from paying enough attention and then learning how to channel my attention in various different areas.
Beautiful. Yeah. Yeah, I can sense the the medicine, right? Like all of us, we have our own unique medicine, and those experiences, as well as what we already came to the planet with, it's okay. This becomes the offering, and it's nowhere else can I get Adam. Yeah. And so that's one of the gifts of for me today, spending time with you. Is like, okay, there is only one being, one person that has what you have and gifts in the way that you gift.
Absolutely. And I want to take this moment to actually really affirm what you just said and actually really declare how grateful I am. We talked about this just before we started recording, but just to have this opportunity to be here with you and to discuss like life as a whole, as opposed to being a psychologist or being this or being that. So I would really like to once again, Ash, thank you for the opportunity just to have an hour or whatever we're going to take here, just to actually be Adam and not to have to fit into a box because, it's what my job demands or whatever. So
Mm,
again, thank you. Thank you.
yeah, yeah. Thank you, and feeling the gift of that, right? When we can put down the identity, the work identities, and the roles, and just be. So, thank you.
I'm happy to
Um,
talk about them though. Happy, yeah, I've got
yeah, yeah.
lots of parts of me that do those roles are so happy to talk about them to the ends of the earth. So feel free
Yeah,
to
but
ask anything you like.
okay. Well, what's most present for me at the moment is curious about where you grew up. What was that like? Was there anything that stands out to you about your upbringing or experiences as a child?
Wow. Okay, you're starting
Yeah,
starting
we
with the
just
easy
let's
stuff.
dive in, shall we?
So yeah, I'm gonna trust that most of your viewers and yourself have a deep understanding that a lot of the patterns in our nervous system are really wired in the first 7 years of our life. 0 to 7 is where like a lot of the real templates get laid down. So absolutely my upbringing and the earlier stages of my life influenced me in a huge way in everything that I am. And so to start sharing the story, I grew up in Adelaide in South Australia. I was born in a place called Blackwood. So being born in a black wood in South Australia was an interesting start. And when I was actually in utero, my mother went through the loss of her only biological brother. So he was killed in a car accident. And so while my mother was carrying me, I was experiencing that grief in my mother's nervous system. When I was born, the doctors told my parents that I had developed arthritis in my left hip. They called it septic arthritis. And they cut me open and they drained fluid out of my hip. And then both of my legs were in plaster for the first kind of 9 months of my life. There was a metal bar between my legs that my parents could pick me up with to hold me.
Hmm.
That was the introduction into the world for me. And of course, because I was so privileged and lucky to have been contracted into a family that lived in the suburbs of South Australia in a Western culture, I had a roof over my head and things to keep me occupied, and I was very privileged.
Hmm.
When I was 3 years old, just before my fourth birthday, I was visiting my grandparents, my father's mother and father, and it was a week before my fourth birthday. And while I was there visiting them, my nana gifted me with a jumper, which one morning she gave me the jumper, and my grandfather was standing in the kitchen doorway reading a newspaper. And my nana put the jumper on, and I had a hood on it. And the hood came down. And in that moment, I heard a thud. And then when I lifted the hood back, my grandfather was lying dead on the floor. Now, I I know that these situations that I'm sharing with you, I'm sharing them in a detailed way because they're very much part of why I do what I do. So I feel that those things that I just shared with you led me to this point where just before my fourth birthday, I had this training that was, you're all alone here, kid. Having my grandfather die in front of me, obviously, my father was distraught. His dad just died.
Hmm.
My nana, who was there with me, she was hysterical because her husband just died. All the adults around me were freaking out. However, little Adam just saw my grandfather lying peacefully on the ground. And so this really began my curiosity into what I would say like the invisible worlds. And straight after that, I used to have experiences where I perceived my grandfather would come visit me and speak to me. And from that point, became very interested in what we could probably label the occult. And I was the kid in the neighborhood that held seances and brought all the neighbor kids together, and we'd do light as a feather and all this sort of stuff. And my mother was extremely spiritually inclined, but she had to kind of keep it all censored because my father was not an identified atheist, but he was very against any kind of spiritual talk in our house. So I had this really quite interesting experience where my mother gave me a profound sense of permission to explore that world, the invisible world, and spirituality, but it had to be sort of behind closed doors in case Dad found out. Um, so that sort of all unfolded quite organically, and I grew up in the southern suburbs of Adelaide, like most kids, and just like sort of tried to play cricket and had a go with footy, and just had these experiences of like, well, of course I can run around on a field for ages and chase a ball and stuff, but why do you want to do it? Like, what? Why? When and then eventually, when I was 8, I got a skateboard, and this was a real spiritual experience for me in that here was a sport. It was presented to me as a sport and a culture and a pastime, which was different to me than footy. Footy was more presented as a sport and as a cultural prison. That was kind of how it was presented, but skateboarding is different. Skateboarding came to me, like I'm 48 now, so yeah, 40 years ago when I was 8, I got this board, and back then, like the Bones Brigade had just brought out like their first videos, and no one in my suburb or around me could talk skate with me, but I could watch these VHS tapes and I could see these guys like overseas, and they just felt like family. And this was a very profound experience for me because it gave me a platform where I could very autonomously and with real sovereignty explore this pathway, which it had a physical movement based thing in it, which required focus and commitment and attention management. It made me healthy because it kept me fit. It required me to drink lots of water and eat good food, and I could do it in my own way. I could do it the way that I wanted to. Like if I didn't want to ollie, I didn't have to ollie, and the coach wasn't there telling me to do otherwise. So there was something really profound about the sovereignty in that. And then I had a very similar experience when I got a computer when I was 10. We got a VIC-20, and I started like looking at this machine going, this is pretty cool, man. Like my parents don't know what this thing is, like, but they bought it and just like these floppy disks. And then when I was 12, I asked for my own Commodore 64 for Christmas. And I learned how to code in BASIC when I was 12 years old, and I started, writing little shooter games. I could make sprites, and no one had a clue that I was able to do this. I'd try and tell them. I'd go, you write, do this, and then if this happens, go this way. And no one would be able to understand what I was talking about. So I just ended up going, screw you guys, I'm just going to sit here. And that was another real profound process where I engaged with this thing in life that, it had parameters and rules with it. And at the same time, it was nurturing my sovereignty. I was allowed to move into it rather than interact with it and then be stopped and blocked and told, no, kid, you have to get a license to do that or whatever. There was sovereignty in it. And then around that same time, like just after 12, I think 13, the next year for Christmas, I got my first guitar. And then a very, very similar process happened there that, I went to school music classes and I started learning a bit of the theory. And, when I was in school music class, I had to play Sweet Caroline and stuff like that. But when I went home, I could sit in my room and like learn Pearl Jam riffs, and I could like actually learn like Pantera, like, and it was this experience that was teaching me how to be sovereign, teaching me how to be present in the world and engage in real time with things that were in my world. And yeah, this is definitely like how I grew up. And yeah, it's essentially the narrative of what has contributed to where I'm at today. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, yeah, of course. Great. Thank you. Thank you. So, sovereignty, just, because I know some people, they hear the word and they think freedom fighter, you
Mm.
know, rejecter of laws and all that kind of thing. So, um, for you, when you use the word sovereignty, what's that mean to you?
First of all, thank you for the question. It's a very insightful question. And I'm going to answer it like a clinician
Hmm.
because, as you say, people have different ideas about what words mean. And often that can really restrict the value we can get from words and the things that we talk about. And so I agree, there are a lot of new age woo woo words that get bandied about. And sovereignty is one of them. So that's why that's a really great question, Ash. And I would like to offer to yourself and to your viewers a way to think about sovereignty underneath all the woo woo ness and the term itself and answer it in the context of the nervous system. So without doing a full lesson about the nervous system right now, but I'm more than happy to expand our conversation into that later.
Hmm.
I trust that yourself and your viewers understand that we have a nervous system. And if we can just maybe just have a general definition of what the nervous system is, it's essentially the interface between the body and the mind. If that works for everybody, it's the physiological interface that tells our mind what our body thinks is going on, and sometimes the other way around. Now, I trust that you and your viewers all know that we have different branches of our nervous system, and one of those branches is called the autonomic branch of our nervous system. And autonomic means a self-reinforcing automatic system. And so we can think about this autonomic nervous system in all of the automatic things that happen inside of our body. So we have a heart and it pumps our blood, but we don't consciously go around and think about it. We don't stop every moment and go, pump now, pump. It happens automatically. And we obviously have a lot of other automated processes that are going on inside of our body all the time. And that also extends then to our emotional patterns and then also to our cognitive patterns as well. So getting back to the question, what is actual sovereignty? My response to that question is that sovereignty is when we understand and have a good relationship with that autonomic nervous system. So that if in any given moment the autonomic nervous system thinks it needs to automate some kind of process inside, that we can meet it and actually just pause for a moment and just check in with what's going on, and we can make an executive decision about whether or not that particular pattern is appropriate in this moment right now, instead of the system just taking over and automatically doing some action. When the system automatically takes over and just does some action, we're not sovereign. We're
Hmm.
kind of on autopilot.
Hmm.
And so that's another way that we could probably think about the term and the construct, and another way, another angle that we could think about it. Being sovereign is when we're not on autopilot all the time. That's
Uh-huh.
another way to think about it.
Thank you. An example of that, you got an example that comes to mind of a situation where that would be applicable?
Does an example come to your mind?
Well, okay, great. I'll
let's
answer
let's
that.
just let's just let's just do a very kind of common one,
Mm.
and trigger warning for any viewers that might actually be dealing with this particular pattern, and that is the pattern of drinking. So let's imagine that we drink alcohol, that if we have a pattern in our system that reaches for the alcohol, and that is automatic and we don't consciously know why we're doing it, well, then that action of drinking the alcohol is an autonomic action, and we're not consciously doing it. So we could probably say that that's not a sovereign action.
Hmm.
It's just an autonomic coping strategy. Whereas, we could actually come to the place where we know all of the parts of us that like drinking and know why they like it. And as long as we're really conscious and aware of all those parts and why they do that thing and when, well, then, for example, if we're celebrating with a group of friends and it's an actual celebration and we have a good conscious reason why we're going to have a drink to celebrate and we're choosing to do that consciously, well, then that's a sovereign choice to have a drink as opposed to just autonomically
Mm.
being pulled to do that without actually consciously knowing why in that moment. And so, we could relegate it simply down to, our habits, but it's way more than that. If we just relegate it to the habits that I do, that's not going to help us. If we can pull that apart and understand that habits have a function and they have a purpose, and it's all to do with this automated system that we have inside of us. Well, until we understand how that works, it's very difficult for someone that automatically reaches for that drink to go, oh, hang on, I'm reaching for that drink. I'm actually just going to pull that back for the moment and actually just go, okay, why do I want that? And then make a conscious and intentional choice.
Mm. Beautiful. Yeah. Yeah. Something, it's not that I'm a psychologist, right? But I work with people, and it's something that comes up often is
Mm.
substances and addiction and people wanting to move beyond those. And one of the things that we've done is, okay, well, what are all the parts saying? What's the voice of alcohol? What's your higher self? What's the self saying? And
Mm.
then what I've found is, without even putting in defined actions, people just being aware of those different parts, over
Well,
time they've backed off on their addictions or substance, or they've actually over time totally released them, and they've returned back to that sovereignty in relation to that.
absolutely. And Ash, I trust that you're probably aware that what you're actually talking about is a framework of therapy itself, and it's called internal family systems, where we actually conceptualize that we are made up of many parts. And this is what the film Inside Out, the animated film Inside Out,
Hmm.
is based on, this idea. So thank you for bringing that up. And I would like to offer a little bit of an extension for yourself and for your viewers on this particular theme. And that is that you mentioned there how helpful it is to just compartmentalize the feelings that we have inside. And I really want to emphasize that why that's helpful is because if we only relate to our emotions inside as like one huge big package of anxiety, for example,
Hmm.
well, that's heavy and that's hard to deal with. If, though, we train our mind to be able to look at that feeling and actually like maybe unpack it a little bit, we might see that that thing that we call anxiety is actually made up of multiple signals. And one of those signals, it might be that I'm hungry. And another one might be that I had this message that I had to send my partner. And then another one might actually be an existential angst. But if we take all these three signals and add them all up together, then we get this massive ball of heaviness. If we unpack them though and we find these three signals, well we can find the part that's hungry and listen to what it needs And then we can go and have a sandwich or have something to eat. And then that part is going to be satisfied. And now that signal dials down. The message one, we can actually send the message. And then that signal goes down. And now suddenly we don't have this massive ball of anxiety. We've just got this part that, just every now and again has a little bit of existential angst. And it's a lot easier to manage just that signal than it is to manage this, oh my God, everything's fucked and I'm going to die.
Mm.
Another little point that I want to share with you and your viewers as well, because you brought this up, is that you mentioned how helpful it can be to like really sort of stop and consider that there might be a part of me that drinks. And if we're not willing to stop and look at that part, it just remains automatic all the time. Well, I'd actually like to share with you to look into that even further, because often there isn't just one part that would drink. There's often many parts that drink for many different reasons. For example, we might have a part that will drink to cope with really heavy emotions. There might be another part of us that drinks because it's Friday night and that's what we always do on a Friday night. We might have another part that drinks when we go to work functions because that's what we feel like we have to do. So sometimes for people doing this kind of parts work, they can just feel into the part that drinks and they can just get to know that part and just start meeting that part as early as they can and just sort of start just reining that part back in. But other people have a real hard time doing that because it's actually multiple parts that drink for all different reasons.
Mm.
And if we suddenly like try and force our body to stop having a drink when we go to work functions, well, that actually might bring up a problem for another part who needs to get along with our colleagues at work. So really being able to really drill into it and really identify exactly what signals make up what I'm feeling. That's what parts work is. And it's a brilliant framework to be able to start just dialing things down and starting to really get clear on the types of patterns that are happening inside for me. So if any of your viewers are not aware of that framework, I really encourage anyone that's listening to this to have a look into internal family systems and to learn parts work because it's very, very helpful and they should be teaching it in schools at kindergarten level. And
Mm.
if anybody is interested in it, there's a brilliant book by the developer of this therapy, who's Dr. Richard Schwartz. And the book is called No Bad Parts. And it's available as an audiobook. It's an amazing audiobook because he actually does little meditations in the recording. So I really, really recommend that book for anybody who's interested in what we're talking about right now.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I'm feeling into the level of depth that you have as a practitioner. So thank you for sharing that. And a teacher too. Yeah. Can feel
Mm.
yeah. So thank you. Thank you.
No,
And
thank you for the
so,
feedback.
yeah. And so we come back to the skateboarding. You're into skateboarding, love it, coding, music. And then what happened with life as you're sort of getting through those teenage years?
Yeah, yeah. So um, I'm sure it's no surprise that what happened was life.
Mm-hmm.
I left Adelaide when I was 18. I just felt the call to adventure, and I just took it. And there was nothing stopping me. And the only person that I knew that was outside of South Australia was a neighbour that I'd grown up across the road from, and he'd moved to the Gold Coast. And so I rang him up and said, "Is there any place can I stay on your couch?" And he said, "Yep." And so I got on a bus and I went from Adelaide to the Gold Coast, and that was my first like real experience of being away from support structures and my parents, and what I found was that I had this real kind of agency in the world. Like I could really do things. like I was on the Gold Coast and I was just skateboarding and just singing and just doing things, and everybody wanted to know me and everybody wanted me in their crew, and it was just this really abundant time. And it was all new for me, so I had quite strong protective parts that were always just watching out for anyone that
Hmm.
might. However, I had a pattern in me that I'm sure that you're probably familiar with, and most of your viewers are probably familiar with. And that pattern is the pattern of I need to work to survive. And so as I was on the Gold Coast without my normal support mechanism, and I had to pay rent and I had to buy food, and so like everybody, as we grow up, we eventually have to start putting aside the things that we love. So my skateboarding and music and stuff started getting traded for time to work and pay bills, and I I had many jobs on the Gold Coast. One of the longest running jobs I had was working in the Hard Rock Cafe retail store. I sold the
Hmm.
t-shirts at Hard Rock
Uh-huh.
for 3 years. But eventually I got this gig managing a cafe. It was in the old Burley Theatre Arcade
Hmm.
the Cold Rock is now. Before Cold Rock was there was a store called Designer Scoop. And yeah, I ran that store.
I remember
And
it. I was on the Gold Coast for 22 years. I used to live at Burleigh.
really,
Yeah, yeah.
oh
And then
man,
I know
yeah,
we were there at the
I
same
ran that
time.
store.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
and we eventually opened another one when the DFO, the first DFO at Runaway Bay opened. We had another
Hmm.
one out there, and so when I was there running that cafe, I had there was a lot of people that came through the cafe, and that there'd be business people that would come and have lunch meetings and stuff there, and there was a group of people that would come pretty regularly, and I kind of got to know them, and after a little while, they asked me if I would come and work for them, and at the time I was running the cafe and I had a company car, and I was like, enough
Hmm.
whatever. But they kept on coming back in, and they eventually told me that they bought and sold hotels, um, and eventually they found out that I was a skateboarder, and then eventually they came in and they said, "Look, we want to buy a resort in Vanuatu, and we want you to design a skate park to put on it." And so I left Designer Scoop, and I started working for these guys. Turned out that like they were sort of criminal types. They were not all of them, but there were
Hmm.
some people in there that were very shady people. And I very quickly like they asked me to work for the company, and they very quickly noticed that I had some very special skills. And mostly in communication, and so they started up inviting me to some of their board meetings, and we'd fly down to Sydney and sit in the Macquarie Bank, and as a young, like 20-ish year old, I would be sitting in these boardrooms trying to negotiate $1 million deals.
Hmm.
It was phenomenal. And I was writing business plans for them and designing logos and doing all sorts of stuff. And then,
Which I imagine was great for your ego. Was it like, as
great
in,
for my
was,
ego.
yeah.
Great for my ego. And these were high flyers, man. So we would, most Friday nights we'd go to the casino. They'd tell me get in the two-up ring, and they'd put
Hmm.
down 10 grand, and I'd be like, they'd be cheering like you're our lucky charm,
Yeah.
and then one evening I blacked out, and then I woke up the next day in a hotel room and realized that I'd been sexually abused. So I worked my way through that, and yeah, it was a big deal to escape that. Um, Energetically speaking, I admittedly, um, I pretty much blackmailed the perpetrator. I
Hmm.
basically said, "I'm going to tell everybody what you did to me." And yeah, and then he went, "No, no, no. Here's a gold watch. Here's leather shoes, here's a suit, whatever you need. Like, just don't tell anyone, don't tell anyone. And so I tried to juggle that for a year before I looked him in the eye and just said, "You will never have any power over me ever again. I'm out." And I
Mm.
just left. I left. Um, and so in that time, during that time as well, because it was a very, I'm going to say, vulnerable situation that I was in, I, I know that I needed some protection. I knew that I didn't have the teachings or the skills to really be able to navigate that experience well. And so I eventually found myself walking into a Kung Fu academy. And the energy of it was just so resonant in what I needed. I joined up on the spot then and there. And then I started training 6 days a week with this Wing Chun Kung Fu Academy. And that's what gave me the sovereignty to eventually like escape this situation. And yeah, man, they were throwing money at me. I was like living in penthouse apartments and yeah, like because I was a singer and they had connections in the industry. Like I had huge offers to do really big recording deals and stuff. And I
Mm.
walked away from it all. I just my spirit went, no, this is not, and I just left. Um, but this during this time, the strengthening of my spirit came through kung fu, and my sifu he taught me the idea of meditation, just the basic idea of learning to still the mind, as well as teaching me the forms that are the Wing Chun system. And so my confidence grew, my strength grew, and eventually, I realized that nothing could harm me. And so I left the Gold Coast. I eventually went to Airlie Beach. Just got in a car and just went north, and eventually went to Airlie and went, this is pretty cool. And I was in Airlie Beach for a little bit. I just did a few sort of menial jobs there until I ended up getting a job in Beachworks, which is a big surfwear store in the middle of Airlie Beach. And it was owned by a lady who runs a lot of the retail in Airlie Beach. She has a company that owns a lot of the businesses. And she identified my skills and made me the store manager of that surfwear store pretty quickly. And we just increased it from $1 million turnover to 3 million in 2 years. And
Mm.
she was like, wow, man. Like,
Mhm.
she's like, I want you on my management team, Adam, because she owned all these different shops.
Mhm.
And we ended up inventing a position for me that we called productivity manager. And I'd just go to all the stores and I'd just like, talk with the store managers and see what the problems were and all the rest of it. And then eventually, the owner of the company just decided to hire a corporate psychologist from Brisbane to come up to Airlie and do like profiling on all the management team. And I thought it was fascinating. Like, and he produced
Mm.
this report about my skills and my weaknesses. And I was like, this is fascinating. And then I realized, like, this is kind of what I'm doing anyway. Like, I'm kind of, reading people and making decisions for their management and stuff anyway. And then the lady that runs that company, she asked me if I'm interested in being the CEO, like so that she could step back and I could step in. And I literally, Ash, I went, I can't be the CEO of a big company. I haven't been to uni yet. I need to go to university to do that job.
Yeah.
And so she went, all right, well, hurry up and do it and come back, and I want to run my company for me. And so that's what took me to university. I was originally going to study psychology so that I could do management, and a lot of the jobs that I had before that were in retail as well. So, sort of, I came to uni in Cairns to study psychology to try and be a better manager in retail industries. After the first semester, I got to study intro to psychology, but I also got to study intro to sociology and intro to anthropology. And something happened to me, and I rang up that old boss and I said, I'm sorry, I'm never coming back. I
Mm.
don't ever want to work in the commercial field ever again. And so that's what took me to Cairns. And then I spent 10 years studying at James Cook University. And I did Two degrees. I did a degree in psychology and I did my honors in psychology. I wrote a thesis on using skateboarding as an intervention for ADHD.
Hmm.
And then I also did a social sciences degree and I double majored in anthropology and sociology.
Hmm.
And so during that time, while I was there at university, there's a lot of flexibility I could bring back my creativity. University, there's a bar, I could sing my songs there again, and I learned to DJ. And I learned about these things called festivals and the people were coming together and transforming together in these spaces. And
Mm.
so during my time at university, yeah, I was very productive in terms of studying, but I also, yeah, I put on festivals. Yeah, ran regular music nights, and it was a really great environment for me to converge like my curiosity and thirst for learning with my creativity. Um, where that all started changing is when kids came along.
Hmm. Well,
So yeah, when
before we go there, I got some questions for you. So curious, what were some of the discoveries around ADHD and skateboarding?
so I wrote my thesis on that inquiry, and that was quite a natural observation. Being a skateboarder, there are a lot of people in the skateboard world who seem to be sort of fairly hyperactive, and I was quite a typically hyperactive kid. I was never diagnosed, and I knew that this practice of skateboarding, it helped settle my mind. It helped settle my nervous system. There was something really important about it for how it organized my system. And so by the time I, had completed my undergraduate and I had the chance to do a research project, I really wanted to quench this thirst and know whether or not skateboarding specifically would be helpful for people with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And so I don't think it's any real surprise that what I found was I essentially measured kids that skateboarded and had ADHD and kids that skateboarded and didn't have ADHD. And then I also had groups of kids who didn't skateboard and had ADHD and kids that didn't skateboard and didn't have ADHD. And so my real interest was in the ADHD groups. And lo and behold, the kids that had ADHD and skateboarded tended to have better outcomes on behavioral measures and mood measures and focus measures than kids that had ADHD but did other things, not skateboarding. So
Mm.
that's how I did the research. And yeah, I just sort of shared the answer there. But yeah, it turned out that the kids that were in my study that skateboarded and had ADHD, they had better outcomes on the measures that I used than the other group. This is just a pilot study. It's just an
Hmm.
honors thesis. So I only had, a few hundred people in it, which in
Yeah.
the research world is just a pilot study.
Hmm.
But that was the results.
And so if we go into your intuition, your theories, why is that? Why is that the case?
Well, thank you so much for the question. And it really kind of comes down to very much what I was trying to communicate when I was younger, when you asked me about growing up and like when I described like learning how to interact with a computer, where I could say, do this, then this will happen. Skateboarding is very much the same. So if we get on a skateboard and we stand in a particular way, then we'll be able to balance. If we don't stand that way, we don't balance and we fall over. So we learn that bit first, and then we learn how to pivot our foot and push. And we do that in a very particular pattern. And if we consistently do that, we're going to learn that we can push and come back to our stance and we roll along. And then we can add an ollie to it. And so it's very much about pattern recognition and then applying that recognition in real time.
Hmm.
And if you don't apply it in real time, you fall off and you hurt yourself.
Hmm.
So that's why I think it's really good for people who have a tendency to really attune to patterns, because that's what I think attention deficit hyperactivity disorder really stems from: a condensed set of patterns or programs in the nervous system that are constantly scanning all the time, always looking for stuff all the time. That's mostly the hyperactivity component.
Hmm.
Often having that pattern happening in your nervous system all the time comes across like we can't pay attention to things. So we also call it attention deficit as well. But in answer to the question, I think that people who have these tendencies, they would get a lot of value out of any practices that pretty much force them to organize the way they interact with the thing that they're interacting with, that forces them to arrange their patterns in real time in an organized way. That then actually literally organizes the neurons in our brain to think in a more organized way, exactly the same as when we learn parts. Parts work helps us think in a more organized way.
Hmm.
So if somebody with these sort of tendencies, ADHD or whatever, is doing a sport like, let's say, footy, well, if there are all these rules and you can't step over the line and you can't do this and you can't do that, well, then there's not a lot of sovereignty in that. And for a system that's constantly looking for other patterns to be able to expand, that's going to restrict a being like that if they're in that sort of structured environment. So something like skateboarding, I mentioned before how for me there was no rules with it. It allowed me that freedom to explore my own internal pattern recognition without being told that it was wrong.
Hmm.
And that's my answer. That's why I think it helps.
And so if somebody, we just put it out there, right? So if somebody was into, say, painting, how, does that assist them with their ADHD, would you say?
Absolutely, and I'm really glad that you brought that up, because my work theoretically is not specifically about skateboarding at all. It's about identifying that practices that allow our creativity to be able to be harnessed is really what's going to help people with ADHD and those kinds of ASD spectrum type
Hmm.
patterns. So painting, absolutely. We could think about it in the very same way with skateboarding. Like there's a base of it. You got to learn to roll first. Just the same as you kind of got to learn how paint works. Like you've got to learn how much water you need to thin it down, or how thick it needs to be. So you've got to have to understand the basics of it. With skateboarding, once you learn the basics of rolling along, like you might then learn how to ollie, which is the next complex stage. And with painting, it's exactly the same. Once you learn how to thin out the paint enough, well, then the next step is you actually have all these different brushes that you've got to actually figure out what they do and how they actually affect the paint and how it goes on the canvas. And so painting requires that same kind of pattern recognition. I've got to learn to do this layer first, and then I do this part, and then I blend to the color, and then I do these details, and then I get this result.
Hmm.
Music would be exactly the same. Any creative endeavor, Ash, is exactly the same. And I want to send that message out to the world.
Hmm.
If you've got kids that are in this category, just nurture their creativity. Allow them to find something that they're passionate about enough to wake up every day and want to engage in it. But let them find what helps them solidify their pattern recognition abilities.
Hmm. So is there something where it's okay, it has that pattern and that structuring, that layering of complexity, shall we say, or skill development, but then there's also the creative aspect, and then there's the autonomous aspect to it too, that they're being creative in their own way. However, there's some sort of foundation in structure.
That's really well said. Thank you so much. And because that is the reality, it all comes together. It all comes together, and that's why when we do something that is creative, it's actually not that easy at first because we don't have the pathways laid out to just automatically execute those. And at the same time, we've probably got other automatic parts in us that are coming up telling us that we can't do it and that we're hopeless and all that sort of stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
they all intersect together in that moment where we actually need to just be sovereign and go, I'm going to choose to try and make a mark here on my canvas. Or I'm going to try and slap my tail down on my board and see what happens. And that edge of, well, I know where I've come from, but I'm going to choose where I go now. Like that to me, man, that is what really is the turning point, and that is what sovereignty is.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Yeah, I hear you doing that in your life time and time again. And just from what I
Mm.
know about you, right, it's like you're at that time right now in your life where there's been this
Yeah, yeah.
structured way of being the psychologist. So there was the full autonomy kind of creative living that you were in, and then there was the choice to come into a more structured. And so, for
Which was a
example,
necessity
yep,
for my I have three children. I have
mm-hmm,
to provide for them, and so
yep,
yet again, I had to trade my energy that I would rather put into creative endeavors. I had to then trade that for an
mm,
income to provide.
yes, and so now you're coming out the other side.
And yeah, now I'm right now at this point in my life, I am at a extremely exciting turning point.
Mm,
Because yeah, I literally am about about to close up my clinic, and I've bought a caravan, and my family, my not my older children, they're older now,
mm,
but my wife and our 4-year-old, we're going to live on the road, and I can still see clients through Zoom,
mm,
through online. However, the whole goal is to return back to that path where my sovereignty can really shine through, and not only for my own individual benefit, but for the benefit of all, and very specifically my daughter, my 4-year-old daughter. And I feel so privileged to have had three children and had I've got a 20 and 19-year-old, and now I've got a 4-year-old, and to be able to have noticed the things that I'm sharing with you today and to see how they have been applied as a parent is such an honor. And to sort of realize all the mistakes that I made when my first children, really the big lesson was that our children just need us to be present. And I was so busy working all the time, that I wasn't there for them as much as I would have liked to have been. Fortunately, I realized that a little bit later on in their life. I separated from their mother, and so I kind of had to figure out how to keep them in my life if I wanted them in my life, because now we were separated, and they spent 2 weeks in their mums and 2 weeks here, and so yeah, I'm really honored to say that yeah, now things have come full circle, and I'm very close to my older children. However, my 4-year-old has actually developed a seizure disorder. So
mm-hmm,
doctors call this epilepsy, and I know that it is a product of just being in an environment that we might call the rat race, and it's just constant pressure to just pay bills and do stuff, and if dad's not really there, showing up and actually modeling to this little being, you know what? Sometimes there are way more important things in life than just going to work. I think that's one of the most important things that I have to do on the planet right now. And so, yeah, just modeling to my children that, yeah, like, it's cruisy here. I've got a clinic. People come and see me. We make money. However, I want to sing again. I want to paint, and I want to skate again, and I want to go and see my friends all around the country and around the world. And so, yeah, I literally right now just in a transitional process, and yeah, bought the caravan 3 weeks ago. Did a test run, Yeah, slowly working with all my clients to sort of rearrange how we work together. And by August, I will be living on the road.
Amazing, amazing, and seeing that smile on your face when you talk about it.
I'm trying to keep it in. I'm trying to
Yeah,
try, but it is
yeah.
it's a and it well it's actually a beautiful experience just to actually share it and just to have someone receive it. Most of the time I share that with people and then they are jealous. Their parts just come up and
Uh-huh.
they just kind of go, "Oh, what are you going to do for money? Well, how are you going to live?" Oh,
Yeah,
so thank you for giving me the space to be able to authentically just share that smile. So
yeah. Oh, awesome. Well, my experience with lots of friends with family who have done that similar things, it's actually more affordable to be on the road than be in a house and be paying the
yeah.
bills and multiple cars and all the things that come, insurances and all those things that come along with that, school fees. So, okay,
Well,
we'll
that's
jump in
that's
a caravan. Mm.
primarily that's exactly why I wanted to do it to begin with. I wanted to create a lifestyle where we didn't have to have so much bills all the time. And that then will create space so that we can do other things,
Mm.
creative things, spend time together.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's primarily the reason that started the idea.
Mm.
I think though that like it's been really challenging, like trying to help my wife understand like the value in it. Of course, she has a lot of parts that come up that are freaking out, like
Mm.
how are we going to pay for things? How are we going to do this? And so just learning to work together and knowing that the system that we used to have that's predictable, that's all getting shaken up. That's it's a real challenge. And yeah, and at the same time, I think we all have these experiences where we get to these places where it's like, I actually can't afford not to do it. If I stay here, I'm going to die. If I
Mm.
stay in the same position, it's a death sentence. So that is a real turning point.
Uh-huh. Beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, what comes to mind is Heather, who's been on the podcast and who you and I both know.
Mm.
Heather Layton. So she talks about in one of her frameworks the basin of safety. It's okay, you can reach up when you have that basin of safety, and that's your kind of foundation. So it's great to have aspirations and be connected to godliness and vision and the other realms. But if you don't have that basin of safety, then it makes all of that kind of shaky and not sustainable. And that's often where people, instead of staying aligned to their vision, it can fall down. So acknowledging you as a partner and helping your partner have that basin of safety with your awareness and your skill set and your love.
Well, I want to declare that it's not any easier just because of my skill set. It's the bottom of it. It's still about love and fear.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
just letting everyone know that it's still challenging, even for a psychologist and someone who's done what I've done. It's the,
Hmm.
the 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 work on the ground is still the same as it is for everybody else.
Hmm. Makes me think of Don Juan from Carlos Castaneda books. Have you ever got into Carlos Castaneda? Yeah. And at the moment, I'm listening to Tales of Power. And so Don Juan says something along the lines of, for a warrior, there is always challenge. It's because the warrior is always going this way and this way. And even in a normal life, the warrior experiences challenge. So acknowledging the
And
warrior.
and and the equivalent in the Buddhist world, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water.
Yeah, yeah, yes, yes. I can relate. Well, thank you, Adam. I'll put all your details in the show notes, so if people want to connect to you for work reasons or just to connect with you for whatever reason they may have, it'll be there. Um,
Fantastic.
and Curious Music, is that online at all?
My music, I have SoundCloud. I essentially I have kind of kept a lot of my music away from like the like sort of commercial sort of world. So yeah, not on Spotify and things like that. I actually am feeling called to actually maybe do that in the next couple of years. So once, yeah, I can find my new life working well, I'll probably start, yeah, doing a bit more professional recording. But SoundCloud, I've definitely got stuff on SoundCloud for sure.
Go.
But probably better for anybody who might be interested is, I'm going to be traveling around the country and I will be taking my guitar with me. And if you meet me in a caravan park or by a fireplace, feel free to ask me to play a song. I'd be so honored to share my medicine through my music.
Hmm. Well, if that happens, I will be asking. If we end up in the same space together, I'd be very honored to hear some of your medicine. So thank you,
Oh,
Adam. Thank you for your time and really enjoyed the chat. Thank you.
me too, Ash. Thanks so much for the invitation.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Cheers, brother.
Thank you, bro. There we